Good morning, everyone. Betty McIntyre with ACDHH. We're here for this week's version of Cup O Capital. So I hope you have your coffee, and we have Becca here, and we're excited to kind of talk about what's going on at the Capitol this past week. How are you doing today, Becca?
Great. I'm doing well. Must have my coffee on hand for a cup of capital.
Oh, that's cute. That's a mic.
Good morning.
Right?
It seems to be getting busier and busier, and interesting things might be going on. So I'm curious to kind of dive into some of the stuff that's been going on. Maybe like a little bills, several bills have been dropped, and some discussion points. So I'm pretty curious, especially what's been going on with Senator Bowers, Speaker Bowers, and just what's been going on with some action related to that. And one specific bill that was assigned to 12 different House committees. What's going on with all this?
Yes. So you folks may have seen this on the news because it not only hit Arizona news, but it hit national news. There was a bill that was dropped by Representative Fillmore out of Apache Junction. And this bill would have completely overhauled how elections would have been administered in the state of Arizona. I mean, it was the most intense bill we've seen. Like no mail-in ballots, no drop-offs. You would have had to, I mean, the Representative Fillmore even said about his bill that he dropped that because he wants us to go back to the way that we voted in 1950s. So this, to kind of understand that everybody on both sides of the political spectrum thought this bill was just too much. And Speaker Bowers did the most unthinkable thing. I've never seen this, and I've looked at the data, has never been done before. He assigned this bill to every single House committee, which means that it's dead. There's no way that bill could make it through all 12 committees in the next 2 weeks, because we have a deadline coming up. February 18th is the last day for all bills to be heard in their original chamber. So when Speaker Bowers assigned it to every single committee, he was not just saying, I want this bill to be dead. He was sending a message to everybody that he is not going to engage in any kind of nonsense when it comes to overhauling elections and the voting in the state of Arizona.
That actually helps me a lot, and I'm sure for a lot of other people that are watching, because knowing what kind of impact that decision has. So thanks for giving us a little bit of I guess the behind the scenes or strategy behind why people make the decisions that they make. Very interesting. And
yes.
Go ahead, Betty.
So to kind of give context, is mostly when a bill is assigned. So the speaker in the House or the president in the Senate, they assign bills to committee. And most bills get assigned to either one or two committees, and that's standard depending on the subject matter. But anything over 3 committees is essentially saying this bill is just dead on arrival. And the clerk's office in the House produced a chart And the only, since like going back through the history, the most committees a bill has ever been assigned is 5. So in the past, right, 5, you knew that bill was dead. 4, that bill was dead. But to have 12. And so that's why we know the speaker was sending a message.
Yeah. Loud and clear.
Yes.
You can't overlook it. Yeah, it's very clear what he was trying to do with that now that you've explained it. Another point, you had mentioned something about some voting bills. It seems like there's a lot that have been introduced this year.
Mm-hmm.
And, as you know, we as the deaf, hard of hearing and deafblind community and other individuals with disabilities in that community as a whole, and, we can't speak for everyone, but a lot of us prefer the convenience of being able to vote from home. And some people do go to the polls, but a lot of us would prefer to do it from home. And so there's what's going on with all of this commotion around the convenience of voting from home.
Yeah. So there are a lot of election bills. And a lot of these bills have come as a result of the Maricopa audit that was done by the cyber ninjas. So if you remember, we had the interview with Garrett Archer from Channel 15 discussing that this past summer. And so there's the majority caucus some members, let me be clear, some members in the majority caucus are dropping bills that they feel will clean up the election and potential fraud that happened in Maricopa County. I want to say this though clearly, that even the audit of Maricopa County and every other official audit never produced any evidence that fraud actually occurred. They're just, even the cyber ninjas said fraud didn't occur. So what we're seeing in these bills are a result of that speculation that was put in that cyber ninja report. And some of that impacts directly our communities and also the hearing community, is mail-in ballots. So they're tightening the ability for folks to vote by mail. So I'll give a couple of examples, and then feel free to ask any kind of follow-up questions on this. We have one bill that prohibits your dropping off your mail-in ballots at ballot drop boxes. So like removing ballot drop boxes. We have another bill that will require mail-in ballot drop boxes to only be available between Monday through Friday, 8 to 5. And there must be security present at the mail drop off. We have another bill that says that if you want to drop off your ballot on election day at a polling site, which anyone right now, if they forgot to mail it in time, they can go drop it off at any polling place on election day, right? And that's nice because you fill it out, you sign it, and you skip the line and then you drop it off, and then you're on your way. But this bill that's going through says that if you want to drop off your mail-in ballot on election day, you have to stand in line and do a second ID verification and show your ID in order to drop that ballot off. So I have concerns about that bill in particular as its impact on our community, because when we go back to why it's convenient for our community, it's not just convenient. Mail-in ballot is convenience, but in an indirect way, it is an accessible option for our communities, right? You don't have to stand in this line. You don't have to figure out what's being said. You don't have to, if, it's loud, it's echoey. I mean, if you're hard of hearing, the sounds that get muffled. If you're, ASL user, you don't have an interpreter. We know the chaos that happens on election day. So can imagine like, okay, I need to drop this off. So now you're preventing me from being able to have the accessibility convenience of being able just to drop off my ballot. The second concern about that bill is, Becca, if you wanted to drop off your ballot, you take your ID, you figure it out how you're going to do this. But what happens if you wanted to drop off your family members, people that you live with, because that's allowed under the law? You were allowed to bring your household member's ballot and drop it off for them. This bill would also require you to sign what's called an attestation, essentially a notary, that you are dropping that off for another person in your household. Okay. So the intent behind that language is that you're not what they call ballot harvesting, that you aren't going around to the neighborhood and collecting everybody's ballots, because that's not allowed in the law, right? But I have concerns about this because once again, the convenience. Are they going to have an interpreter? Are they going to have DRI? How are they going to make this accessible for our community members? What does this mean for our deafblind voters? So if we have voters who are deafblind and their family members are dropping it off for them, what does this look like and what does this mean? So I think there's some practical implications that folks who are introducing these bills are not thinking about the nuances to what they're introducing. Does that make sense?
Yeah, wow. It's a lot of food for thought, because there's a couple different bills here all proposing different things. And I think that's why it's so important to be having this conversation so that we bring to light all of these issues. We want to be able to have, as private citizens, the involvement and be able to say yay or nay that we do or don't support certain bills as they're going through the legislative process. And, ACDH can't do it all alone. It's going to require you as the community that's watching to understand and be a part of this. So thanks for sharing that, Betty.
Exactly. And that's one of the things that we're going to be doing in our news updates that we send out via email is when these bills start to, move forward, we'll do some call to actions. And so folks know how they can, contact their legislative member and try to make it as easy as possible, because I think it's important. Actually, I don't want to think. I know it's important for members to understand, for legislative members to understand, this isn't just about the convenience factor, right? Because their perspective is like, well, so what? Like, go ahead and get your ballot. If you don't want to deal with that, get your ballot in the mail in time. But if they're like me, any voter is like me, I like to wait as long as possible because who knows what's going to come out. I mean, how many times have we been watching the news and like right before the elections, like a huge bomb drops off, and you're like, well, I don't want to vote for that candidate because, what they just did, I don't feel is appropriate, right? So there's a lot of that that's going on. And mail-in ballots really are an accessible option for our community.
Yeah, definitely. I agree. And I'm glad you pointed that out, that it isn't just about convenience, but it's about the accessibility for our community. Absolutely. Which I had wanted to talk about that a little bit earlier. So thank you for bringing that back up. Something else that I wanted to mention was just talking about the topic of DDD and group homes and some bills related to that. Can you expand on that topic?
Yeah. So a couple of years ago, there was the Hacienda, what's called the Hacienda healthcare case, where that woman who was, in a coma was raped by the nurse, and she was impregnated as a result of that rape. And our own executive director, Sherry Collins, sat on a House of Representatives committee where they brought in all the disability groups to talk about how can we prevent this from happening again. So ever since that situation and that committees met, these bills have been introduced, and unfortunately they haven't been passed, and so they continue to be reintroduced. However, in addition to those, there have been some family members who have adult children in DDD group homes. There is a parent that in our community, her child is deaf and also has some other disabilities. And the parents are actually, they've gotten involved. They've gotten exactly what we want from our community. And they went and spoke with Senator Bartow about some issues and solutions in DDD group homes. And as a result of those conversations, there have been some bills introduced related to DDD group homes. So there's a bill that would create special group homes for complex medical and behavioral needs. So not just your typical group home needs, but things that, are above and beyond that would require specialized care. So that's one of the bills that that was introduced. There's another one related to oversight. So who will investigate and have oversight over DDD group homes? And then the third bill is requiring group homes to have electronic monitoring. So having cameras in the home, for ensuring that, caretakers and providers and other members in the group homes are not harming their loved ones. So those three specific bills, I can tell you, came as a result of family members, getting frustrated with the system, and one of them being a parent within our community who, did exactly what we say, if you have a problem, let's come together and we'll figure it out. So.
Wow. Yeah, it is so important that we, make the effort and ensure the safety and the well-being and the welfare of the individuals in these group home settings, and not just group homes, in all different types of settings. So I'm happy that you shared that, and I'm interested to see what the result of those bills being introduced is over the next coming weeks. Yeah. Okay, let's talk about aging and dementia. I was reading a little bit of the language in that bill, and I believe that their goal is to establish some sort of, what do we call, advisory council, with the purposes of that being what? Do you know, Betty?
Yeah, the purpose of the creation of the advisory council will be to create a state plan specifically on addressing the needs. So resources, funding, and awareness around dementia and Alzheimer's. Yeah.
Okay, interesting. Now I'm seeing, more and more in the deaf community, they're really bringing forward this. I guess what I've seen is from CODAs specifically,
Mhm.
children of deaf adults that are caring for their aging deaf parents. And these aging deaf parents happen to have dementia, and they're showing
Mhm.
short video clips and just trying to make aware on a national level what's happening in the deaf community with the aging deaf
Mhm.
adults, because it's just, you know, people think, oh, it doesn't happen to deaf people. It happens to deaf and hard of hearing and deafblind people too. They're a part of this process. So I think it's pretty cool that they've set this up.
Yeah, and I'll actually share this. The commission, as you know, Becca, we put out that survey to our community members this past winter, 55 and over, and dementia and Alzheimer's was one of the major issues that came out of that survey. And so when we saw this bill being dropped, we went and met with the sponsor, and we actually requested an amendment to the bill to include the commission as an agency that will sit on that advisory council. Because this is something that I did not know until we started researching, the challenges that of aging with hearing loss, and as a result of community members coming and talking with us. And I found in our research that individuals who have hearing loss, that actually puts them at a greater vulnerability of having dementia. So there is a direct correlation between hearing loss and dementia. So that's super important. And I think that's a factor that as more and more evidence, science-based research comes out, it's reinforcing that connection. And so that's why we have requested for the commission to be on this advisory council and to be part of that state plan, because it doesn't make sense to be talking about dementia and Alzheimer's and creating solutions if we're not talking about a community that's going to be the most vulnerable and most prone to this horrible disease. So I encourage folks to continue to monitor our legislative updates. And then if we need y'all to send an email or to contact your member when the time is ready, we will definitely be doing that, because I think it would be wise for us to be able to be at the table so we can talk about what this really looks like for our community and how do we implement resources and solutions to help.
And I wanted to add a couple things that came up while you were going through that. And yeah, I agree. It's so important to have ACDHH at the table with that advisory council. So hopefully, I'm crossing my fingers there that pans out. But when you were talking about dementia in relation to hearing loss, I do recall one staff person talking about the untreated hearing loss has a higher risk related to dementia. And I do, remember her talking about that, because for the deaf community, we have our communication and access to that continuously. For a hard of hearing person, however, that just loses connection via their hearing. The isolation happens, and that's where we're seeing the studies show the higher rate, which I think is so interesting.
Yeah, I'm looking for something real quick because I found this statistic from Johns Hopkins, and So John Hopkins did a 12-year study, and in that study, they found that someone with a mild hearing loss doubles the dementia risk. Moderate hearing loss triples, and those with severe or profound hearing loss are 5 more times likely to develop dementia. So, and then if the hearing loss is untreated, then the cognitive decline increases at a faster rate. So that is, I think, some profound studies. So that's where, we talk about the mild to profound and what the increase, but then what that means if you have untreated. So if it's untreated, then it's like, I think that how I read it was you have a faster decline because the
Right.
Alzheimer's and dementia increases at a faster rate. However, that works in reality, but that's so profound. And once again, it reinforces what we're talking about, right? Like 5 times.
Wow.
5 times.
Yeah.
So that's why the commission is really focused on addressing this issue, because we've got to create resources. We've got to create solutions for the community that we serve. And so it's, and this is something that's very important to not only us as staff, but also to our executive director.
Yeah, thank you for bringing all that information and clarifying all of that. So I'm looking forward to seeing what happens with that bill. The other maybe concern that would come up for the deaf, hard of hearing, deafblind community is related to the parent choice with school curriculum bill. Can you talk about that a little bit more?
Yes. Well, I'll try my best. So just like there is a lot of voting bills, there are a lot of education bills. And a lot of these education bills are around parents' rights. And there's a couple bills where one in particular, I'm trying to figure out exactly what it does and how it impacts on the community. But right now in Arizona, every parent who has a child in the public education system, and that's very key that we say the public, not private, public education system, has the right to go in and request to see the curriculum that's being taught to their child. This bill that's been introduced says that teachers and school districts must post every website, every curriculum, every research, every article, every video, all on a website that parents can have access to. And that if there's any change in the curriculum, that the teacher must update the link within 72 hours before the change. And that if a parent, and this is where I'm trying to figure out the legalities, if the parent does not approve of that curriculum, then they can file like some sort of complaint within to the teacher and to the school district. And then there's some penalties, there's some fines and fees if this isn't done. And then there's also something about, there's a timeline around like within 30 minutes, so that's the part we're trying to figure out is what's the legal responsibilities of the school district. So how can a school be compliant with that if, for example, the parent needs an accommodation? You can't just go and get an interpreter within 30 minutes of a request. We know that, right? So like, what does this look like for the school being able to be compliant with this law if a parent needs an ADA accommodation, to review those materials. So because the ADA still applies, right, for the parent. And so that's what we're looking at right now and seeing what that means for the schools, because that's, so, it's like, what does that look like? So.
Wow. Okay. That's a lot to think on.
Yeah.
Interesting. I guess we're just going to have to think about it a little bit more and get some more information, or at least just see, how it pans out. Maybe the next Cup of Capital will have a little bit more clarification. We'll just keep our eyes on it and see what happens.
Exactly.
Okay, this is a little bit off topic. I just was wondering if you have any updates, because I remember there was a couple bills related to ASDB, the Arizona School for the Deaf and Blind. But is there anything going on with that now?
Okay, so ASDB has two bills that are being sponsored by Representative Udall. One is, I don't have the numbers memorized yet, but I think it's 2565 is the cleanup bill. So folks remember last year, the ASDB bill was making them an LEA, a local educational agency. And so this bill is just a cleanup of that bill. So just tightening up some things that didn't get addressed in the last bill. So pretty minor stuff. And then there's another bill, 2566, that is related to the voucher cap rate. So two pretty easy, innocuous bills. So we'll monitor those and let folks know. But
great. Thanks for the update. I wasn't sure if there was, something more to it than that, but that's good.
Pretty easy.
Yeah, easy enough. Just to make sure that we're not missing anything, you know what I mean? Just so that I know what's going on out there. So that's great. Can you talk about the request to speak, or RTS for short? There's been talk about the system being very slow. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, so the AZLEG, leg.gov, has been completely slow. And so that's, to me, an indication that lots of people are on the system. So lots of people are looking at bills, lots of people are utilizing the RTS system. So the system, it's government. We don't have a lot of resources. So I laugh because when you have so many people engaged in government and policy, and you don't have the bandwidth behind the scenes for the connection, it slows down for everybody. And so I think it's important, if we have anyone who's watching, to know that, like, it's not you, it's the system. And just keep trying, or maybe pick another day. I would stay away from Sunday afternoons, because that's usually when people get on to look at the calendar for the week. But, if you're getting frustrated, walk away, take a deep breath, come back maybe in a couple of hours if you're trying to sign in on a bill. So it's like just letting folks know.
Yeah, we definitely want people to be more engaged and not let that become a barrier and them get frustrated and never go back to the process. So keep trying. That's a great tip, to stay away from the Sunday afternoons. Try a few hours later, because we still want people to be involved and speak up on the specific.
Exactly.
Okay, I want to maybe just wrap up this Cup of Capital with some maybe weird words that we see in this kind of legislative process. You had brought up a word, it could be a term or a phrase that we don't maybe know so much about, or we don't see often, specifically talking about cow. We're not talking about the animal cow. What is the cow?
Yeah, so I thought it would be fun this year um, to put in our update, like defining some terminology, some policy terminology, because I know we get a lot of questions from community members, but like, what are you saying? What does that mean? And so I thought, well, why not make this fun? And take a section and just kind of define the process, define a word, these phrases. And so cow, as was in last week's legislative update, is not the animal, it's an acronym. And and because we all love our acronyms, and so it means committee of the whole, and that's when a bill goes to the floor in front of all of the members and they debate the bill. So a cow is not when a bill is voted on, it's only when there's a debate and a discussion. So typically a bill that is amended has to be heard in cow. Has to. If the bill was amended in committee or it's going to be amended on the floor, they have to discuss the amendment, the amended bill. Okay, so right, so there's that. But there's also another part of cow is that if a member, if they want to debate a specific bill that hasn't been amended, they can reject it going on to what's called the consent calendar. We'll define that later. And they can put it over here to the cow calendar, and then they can force the debate on that bill. So it's a tool that actually comes from the 1600s, comes to us from our English, British family from way, way, way back when, that is carried over in our democratic governed system. So a little history.
Very cool. It's always nice to know the history behind things to try and make sense of why we're doing what we're doing and what does this word mean and why are we still using it. So that actually makes me think of another point. If there's just any like questions or phrases or words related to the legislative process or policy, make sure that you email us here at ACDHH. You can email us info at email, and let us know in the subject line, I want to know, and give us your questions. We'd love to answer them for you, whatever it is that you want to know.
Exactly. All right.
Okay, so I think that is all that we have on our agenda for today's discussion. Do you have any last comments, Betty, before we wrap up?
No, I think it was a great Cup of Capital. I just want to say thank you everyone for joining us today. And as Becca said, if you have a question or you want to know something, give us an email. Be happy to answer it.
Right. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.